Hello, welcome to Icpess Congress 52nd session. I will present the participants of this session to you at the moment. Firstly, first presentation is Economic Output and High Technology Export Panel Causality Analysis by Elma Satrovic. Then Selçuk, Balı, and İbrahim Özmen made a presentation, made a video, which is New Heterodox Economics. Then Adnan, Muslija, and Elma Satrovic made another presentation for us for this session. The name of the presentation is Time Series Analysis of the Relationship between High Technology Exports and Economic Development, the Case of Turkey. The next presentation is Measuring Business Performance, a literature analysis of the main components by Jona, Puci, and Suzana Guxholli. The next presentation is Purchasing Behaviors of Ready-to-Wear Sector Customers by Onur, Köprülü, Mithat, Turhan, and İlter Helvacı. And lastly, the last presentation of this session is Problems of Securities Market Development in Georgia by Besik Bauchadze. Now we will listen our participants' presentations. Have a nice view. Have a nice and pleasant watch. Thank you.
Initially, I would like to greet audience. My name is Elma Satrovic and I'm assistant professor at Çay University, Turkey. The title of my paper is Economic Output and High Technology Export Panel Causality Analysis. As an introduction, I would like to say that some of developing countries have reached rapid economic growth in the last decades, and many others indicate that one of the most important reasons behind was the improvement of export performance. Therefore, export is considered to be an important determinant of economic output, especially in the long run. Therefore, many countries, especially developing ones, actively are trying to improve high technology industry. And as a reason, they indicate that this industry is expected to create new job opportunities and also to improve economic output of the host countries. And in general, previous studies analyzing the relationship between high technology export and economic output basically focus on the role of this high technology industry in the relationship between foreign direct investment and economic growth. And the general conclusion of these previous studies indicates that foreign direct investments are efficient at contributing to economic growth under these certain conditions. And these conditions are, for example, developed financial system. Therefore, in our research, we tended to collect the panel data in order to estimate the causal relationship between economic output and high technology export. And we have collected the data for 70 countries, and we have divided these data into developed and developing countries. And the period of interest is 1995 to 2015. Therefore, this paper proceeds as follows. In section 2, we'll summarize the literature on the relationship between high technology export and economic output. In section 3, we'll give a detailed description of data, variables, as well as the methodology. In section 4, we will summarize the main results of the empirical research. And finally, we will provide conclusion in section 5. In terms of literature review, I would like to say that the impact of export has been a popular issue of debate in up-to-date studies analyzing the relationship between foreign direct investments and economic output. However, the empirical evidence on the direct link between high technology export and economic output is scarce. And to mention a few, Mahmoud and Mahmoud have conducted panel VECM Causality in order to examine causal relationship between foreign direct investments, exports, and economic growth in Europe and Asia. And the results of this paper indicate a bidirectional causal relationship between GDP and foreign direct investments in the short run in developing countries in Europe. The order Osman in 2017 indicates a significant and positive impact of high technology export on economic growth, while the last orders mentioned here indicate a unidirectional causal relationship running from economic growth to export. In terms of methodology and variables, we'd like to emphasize that high technology exports is approximated using current US dollar high technology export, defined as products with high R&D intensity, such as in aerospace, computers, pharmaceuticals, scientific instruments, and so on. GDP is the proxy variable of output, and this is the current US dollar GDP. And the World Bank defines this proxy variable as the sum of gross value added by all resident producers in the economy, plus any product taxes and minus any subsidies not included in the value of the product. And finally, in this paper, we'll be controlling for the impact of foreign direct investments net inflows. In terms of methodology, we can summarize it as follows. Firstly, we'll be testing the presence of panel unit root. Secondly, we will analyze the presence of cointegrating relationship. Thirdly, we will explore whether or not the causal link between variables exists. And in order to test for the sensitivity of results and to avoid robustness errors and to deal with the reverse causality issue, we'll be applying an ARDL model. And finally, a Fisher type unit root test has been presented to understand the stationarity properties of panel data. In empirical results and interpretation sections, where we firstly start by explaining the descriptive statistics, there are three groups of countries of interest, so all countries, developed countries, and developing countries, as well as the three variables of interest. And we can see that in general, the developed statistics, the developed countries have lower values compared to developing in terms of economic output as well as high technology export. Table 2 summarizes the results of Fisher type unit root test, and what we can see here is that all of the variables are stationary at the first differences. Table 3 summarizes the results of cointegration test, and we can see that in terms of all countries, developed countries as well as developing, the evidence on the cointegration relationship cannot be rejected. Furthermore, Table 4 summarizes the results of Granger non-causality test. What we can see from the Z-bar and Z-bar TIL statistics is that both high technology export Granger causes GDP as well as GDP Granger causes high technology export in terms of all countries, and these results are supported in terms of developed and developing countries as well. Moreover, we have conducted ARDL model. What can we see from this ARDL model is that high technology export positively impacts the economic output in the long run, as well as in the short run in terms of the sample of all countries. In terms of the developed countries, we can see a positive relationship between economic terms of interest in the long run as well as in the short run. In terms of developing countries, the positive relationship between economic terms of interest is recorded in terms of short run as well as in terms of long run. And based on this table, we can see that in terms of long run, higher impact is reported for developing countries, and in terms of the short run, higher impact is reported for developed countries. Therefore, empirical results indicate that the results of unitary test indicate that null hypothesis on unitary root is rejected for all of the variables. Cointegration test reports cointegration relationship. Granger causality test indicates a bidirectional relationship between variables of interest, while ARDL framework suggests a positive relationship between economic terms of interest. Taking into account the positive relationship between life insurance, taking into account the positive relation between high technology export and economic output, we can say that the governments should make a big effort in order to promote high technology export, since it tends to have a great role in contributing to economic output. The Appendix 1 summarizes the countries used in this research. Here is the short list of references. And
hello, I can explain something in Heterodox Economics in this video, this paper. I'm İbrahim Özmen and my friend Selçuk Balı. Yes, firstly, paper I can tell paper framework. Introduction, new heterodox economics approaches, behavioral economics, experimental economics, evolutionary economics, neuroeconomics, and complexity economics, and then conclusion. Yes. History of economic flow is vital as they illustrated the history of human evolution. In the recent past, economics has undergone a serious transformation with the sharp division. The vision is based on two main points: the neoclassical economics, which is part of the classical economics, and the other. The neoclassical is considered as the future ends of classical economics. In terms of structure, we can say that economics is divided into two parts: the heterodox and orthodox. When orthodox is defined, yes, when the orthodox defined in the religious context, it means correct, that is authors, and belief, teaching, that is doxa. Thus, it means in Greek correct belief. Orthodox is those used in submission that are commonly accepted traditions and beliefs and economics. Science economic policies are made. Science economic policies are made of generally accepted concept. They are called orthodox economic policies. The word heterodox is composed of two Latin words, heteros meaning different and doxa meaning belief. Heterodox therefore names application except for traditional approaches and view. In this study, 5 of the new heterodox approaches will be discussed. These are behavioral economics, experimental economics, evolutionary economics, neuroeconomics, and complexity economics. Yes. Firstly, behavioral economics is defined as the study of mindset, as it relates to the economic decision-making process of the institution and individuals. It incorporates psychology into analyzing decision-making behind an economic outcome. It incorporates psychology into analyzing decision-making behind an economic outcome. such as why will the consumer buy one product and not the other? The main idea being is the assumption of profit maximization or utility made by economics, real exploration of how people behave, and the other thing of people maximize subjective expected utility. On the other hand, experimental economics is a division of economics that study human behaviors in a controlled setting, either in a lab or open file, other than just using mathematical models. The experimental economics is used to study and understand how and market function as they do. Real people making real shoes in the markets are used in the experiments so as to test whether the theoretical economics model describes the actual market behavior. Thoroughly explaining the power of markets and how they participate in response to incentives which are usually cash. Evolutionary economics is a field in economics that focuses on the change that have occurred over time process of the material processing and the institutions surrounding this process, that is in the production, storing, and consumption. It is closely related to research into the other social sciences such as economic anthropology, international political economics, and the economic sociology. Evolutionary economics utilizes the concept from the evolutionary biology to expound on how economics evolution happens. Pursuing of goods creation and distribution changes technology. The institution, the individual's behavior must evolve also as the pursuing, creation, and distribution process change. Neuroeconomics tries to link economics, psychology, and neuroeconomics to get a better understanding of economic decision making. The main fundamentals of economic theory assume that the intricacies of the human brain will never be discovered, but advancing technology and particularly neuroscience has enabled to analyze of brain activity. But behavioral economics has just shown that human behavior does not always follow economic theory or even optimize on utility. Complexity economics is a new approach to economic science. It uses models from complexity theory to look and model the economy as a multifactor but an adaptive system. Complexity economics is an approach developed to deal with the limitation of the standard economic theory. Complexity theory works closely with the evolutionary economics, chaos theory, and control theory. This allows a whole new paradigm built on non-linear system theory. It's different others. This helps more complex pictures to individual aliens and more motives of their action. Conclusion is in the last 30 years, with the scope of economics in its content and with the significant change and development in the methodology it has used, economics, which is basically expressed as a social science, have become a core technical science. Nowadays, with the development of computer technology and programmers, more realistic models have become possible. In the phase of experimental economics and neuroeconomics, models based on the construction of virtual time in the computer environmental have been established with the limited concern time in laboratory, environmental and complex economics. Behavioral economics as well as the concept of the rationally have begun to be used in addition to the concept of the rationally. These new approach have been both influenced by one another and supporting each other. Thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Initially, we would like to greet audience. The authors of this paper are Adnan Muslija, PhD candidate at University of Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Elma Satrovic, assistant professor at Çağ University, Turkey. The title of our paper is Time Series Analysis of the Relationship between High Technology Exports and Economic Development, the case of Turkey. As an introduction, we would like to emphasize that the World Bank indicates impressive macroeconomic performance in Turkey since the year 2000. And the heart of this performance is considered to be macroeconomic and fiscal stability. Taking this into account, the employment has increased significantly in Turkey as well as income, and on the other way, extreme poverty has been reduced. Turkey has urbanized dramatically, and taking these facts into account, we were motivated to explore the impact of high technology exports on economic development in the case of Turkey. We have taken Human Development Index as an appropriate proxy of economic development. This is adjusted by UNDP, and UNDP reports HDI value to be 0.767 in Turkey in the year 2015, and this ranks Turkey at 71st position out of 188 countries and territories in the world. An increasing trend in HDI is summarized in graph 1. Moreover, in terms of high technology export, the dynamic increase is recorded during the observed period, and this is summarized by the graph 2. The paper proceeds as follows. In the section 2, we summarize previous empirical studies on the relationship between economic development and high technology export. Data variables and methodology are given in section 3. Section 4 presents empirical results and also interprets the obtained results. And the last section summarizes the main conclusions of our paper. In terms of literature review, it's important to emphasize that up-to-date studies have extensively researched the impact of export on economic growth. However, the empirical evidence on the impact is scarce. In addition, high technology export is expected to contribute not only economic growth but also the standard of living. Therefore, there is a need to analyze the relationship between a more holistic approach, that is economic development, and high technology exports. To mention a few, this slide summarizes the orders analyzing the relationship between economic terms of interest. And these orders agree on the positive relationship between high technology exports and economic development. And taking this into account, a positive impact is expected in Turkey as well, especially taking into account its dynamic growth in the capital of Ankara. In terms of variables, we'd like to say that the data used to estimate the causal relationship between economic development and high technology export in Turkey are collected over the period 1990 to 2015. The sources of the data are the World Bank and UNDP, and the main criteria to select a time frame was the data availability. As we previously said, Human Development Index is selected as a proxy of economic development, and this HDI is defined as a summary measure of average achievement in key dimensions of human development, such as long and healthy life, being knowledgeable, and have a decent standard of living. Usman and Yo indicate that appropriate proxy variable of high technology exports is high technology export current US dollar, and the World Bank defines this variable and high technology products as products with high R&D intensity, such as in aerospace, computers, pharmaceuticals, scientific instruments and electrical machinery. And also in this paper we are controlling for the impact of foreign direct investments that is considered to have an important role while analyzing the relationship between aforementioned economic terms of interest. And in terms of methodology, the analysis starts by calculating the most important measures of descriptive statistics. Moreover, the stationarity of variables will be tested using the appropriate tests. In addition, Johansen cointegration test will be used to examine the cointegrating relationship between economic development and high technology export. Granger causality test is used to analyze the existence of the bidirectional relationship. And finally, we are applying ARDL model. Table 1 is the first table in empirical results and interpretation section, and this table indicates the average value on Human Development Index over the observed period, as well as high technology export and foreign direct investments. Table 2 summarizes the number of legs needed. Since three most important criteria, AIC, HQIC, and SBIC agree, we can say that the optimal number of legs in this paper is 1. Table 3 summarizes the results of augmented Dickey-Fuller test. What can we see from this table is that Human Development Index proxy variable of economic development is stationary at the first difference. The same holds true for the high technology export proxy variable as well as foreign direct investment. And also we need to mention that we have calculated the first logarithm of variables in order to ease interpretation and to deal with high standard deviations. Table 4 summarizes the results of Johansen test for cointegration. Trace statistics is larger than critical value. The same holds true for max statistics. Therefore, the null hypothesis on no cointegration can be rejected. Table 5 summarizes the results of Granger causality wall tests. What can we see here is at the 10% level of significance, there is a bidirectional relationship between Human Development Index and high technology exports. So the results of our paper indicate that the values of trace and max statistics are greater than the critical, so the null hypothesis on no cointegration can be rejected. High technology export has a positive impact on economic development, but also can arise as a result of achievement in key dimensions of economic development in the country. Moreover, high technology export is reported to have a significant positive impact on economic development. No significant impact of HT on HDI is recorded in a short run in the initial model, while the results of extended model in ARDL approach indicate a significant positive impact of HT on HDI in the long run. And as a conclusion, we can say that results indicating positive relationship between high technology export and economic development in the long run can be of great importance for key decision makers in Turkey. And these results suggest that Turkish government should make an effort to improve the export of high technology, since it has a great opportunity to contribute to key dimensions of human development and consequently to economic development. Here is the short list of references, and thank you for the attention.
Hello everyone, my name is Jona. I'm a lecturer at the Canadian Institute of Technology. The paper presented at the conference is a study conducted with my PhD supervisor, Professor Suzana Guxholli. The paper is entitled Measuring Business Performance Indicators, a literature analysis of the main components. As the topic indicates, it's just a section of the literature review. The key points that will be analyzed in this paper are background on the topic. Then we will go on with the literature review section, the internal and external indicators that do affect business performance. And lastly, some conclusions are derived. The concept of performance is extensively used across the literature, including innovation, financial, operations management, and strategy. Nevertheless, a few people would agree on what the term really means. Performance, some have defined it as return on investments, return on assets, return on equity, efficiency, management effectiveness, on increase in sales, better productivity, or higher profits. Researchers have studied the performance of corporations, manufacturing firms, businesses, organizations, supply chains, suppliers themselves, and the supply function. The issue nowadays is to whether we should use only financial indicators or maybe a combination of both financial and non-financial measures. Studies investigate nowadays how non-financial indicators drive financial performance. Many authors have argued that customer satisfaction has an impact on return on investment, for example, of Swedish companies. However, the relationship did not occur in the service sector. If we start with the literature review, we have focused our study or divided our study in internal and external factors. The internal environment of a business plays an important role in mapping the unique features that distinguishes a business from others. Differently from the external environment, the internal one, or the internal components, are to a great extent controlled and managed by the body of the company. The indicators that are discussed later on are as shown in the slides. To start with, capital structure is how the company finances its assets, whether it uses debt, equity, or a combination of both. The first one to initiate a theory on this was David Durand in 1952, and he stated that the value of a company would increase as debt increases. This was contradicted by Modigliani and Miller in 1958, and he stated that debt is irrelevant to the value of the company. Of course, a mix of results with regard to a positive relationship between them and negative relationship between them are derived. In 2013 and in 2014, for a sample of companies in Pakistan from 2005 up to 2008, Tariq, Ali, and others stated that leverage significantly affects the performance of businesses negatively. The same result or the same link, the same relationship was derived by Lee in 2014 for a sample of 163 observations from 1999 to 2009 in Taiwan. The other indicator analyzed is liquidity. Liquidity is defined as the ability of the company to cover its liabilities when they are due. Of course, the more liquid the company is, the better it can manage the obligation that the company has to pay. A positive relationship for a sample of insurance companies from 1985 until 1995 was derived from Brown in 2001. Later, however, an insignificant or weak relationship between the two variables, between liquidity and sales, was derived for the textile industry in Pakistan from 2005 up to 2010. A very important indicator is business size. Almost all studies that consider the influence of size on performance have revealed a positive relationship of these two variables. This is noticed, this can be seen also from the slide where most of the authors are located in the positive relationship between these two variables. This is true because large companies have a better efficiency due to economies of scales. Another indicator is business risk. As it happens, globalization is exposing companies to different types of risk. Allen and Ryan 1995 implied that shocks emerging in one market can be passed on to the other market. However, the empirical evidence to support this claim is limited due to the risk that is calculated. How the risk is calculated. Business risk here in the study is calculated as the ratio of standard deviation of EBIT divided by the earning before interest and tax. Another indicator is market share. Market share is calculated as company size divided by industry size. Different studies have linked profitability with market share. The crucial question has been to whether a high market share could ensure greater profit. Authors who have investigated this issue have failed to resolve the dilemma, and therefore the issue remains up to date with results that perhaps need further investigations. The last indicator with regard to the internal environment is management efficiency. This approach was followed by Deming in 1986, and he said that improvement of quality management would have a direct effect on the productivity and therefore on profitability. According to him, qualitative managers, in an effort to optimize the system, would bring long-term benefits to the company, would bring long-term benefits to its shareholders, customers, employees, and to the society. His view had a strong influence on quality evolution during the 90s by emphasizing the importance of management for a business. His view was opposed by polls in 1995, and it was the first empirical study to contradict the total quality management, where linked to only 3 of 12 practices linked to total quality management were linked to higher performance. With regard to the external environment, macroeconomic policies pursued in a country affect substantially enterprises, inflation, economic activity, unemployment, and income distribution among individuals. So it can be said that the following indicators, as shown in the slide, affect more or less businesses in the same way. What is for businesses to do, and that we can say, is that the success or failure of a business depends on the ability to adjust to the environment in which the company operates. For instance, when the government introduces new policy, the company should be able to adapt to these changes. Likewise, technological changes can make certain products out of date, such as what happens in the industry of televisions or computers. Therefore, if the business wants to continue its operation, it must adjust and adapt to these changes. Lastly, some conclusions are derived. As it was seen in the increasing literature, there is an increasing literature that evaluates the effects of factors, institutions, policies on the performance of business and economic growth. Methods used by these inquiries and institutions are different. Regardless of the methodologies used, the claim of many scholars is that the internal and external factors can stimulate businesses to better financial performance. What the study seeks to do, or how it aims to contribute to the literature, is by providing new support or by increasing the evidence to the existing literature, or maybe to help what has been done before from other researchers in order to give more empirical evidence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, this is Onur Köprülü. I'm here to make my presentation virtually. The name of our research is Purchasing Behaviors of Ready-to-Wear Sector Customers. And we are 3 authors. We are all assistant professor doctors, Dr. Onur Köprülü, Dr. Mithat Turhan, and Dr. İlter Helvacı from Mersin University, Silifke School of Applied Technology and Management, Turkey. I would like to introduce you first of all the aim of our research. We have focused on purchasing behaviors of customers, and especially the customers on ready-to-wear sector and their decision-making process, and we have categorized them according to their demographic features. As you can know, customer behaviors have been focused by many researchers until now, according to their usage of company resources, the role of emotions, and their environmental significance. The research scope and methodology regarding this paper is as follows. We have used survey method as a data collection method, and we have reached 100 participants for our survey, and we have used convenience sampling methods for the size of the sampling. And Pearson correlation coefficient and Cronbach's alpha and descriptive statistics have been the main statistical methods that we have used in this research. Now, I would like to introduce you our research hypothesis. Our first hypothesis is that there's a relationship between brand trust and openness. The second hypothesis is there's a relationship between brand trust and consciousness. And the third one is there's a relationship between brand trust and agreeableness. Fourth hypothesis is there's a relationship between brand trust and extroversion. And our final hypothesis is there's a relationship between brand trust and neuroticism. And now I would like to give you brief information about our research findings. As you can see on the table, that the number of women involved in this research is 63 and 37 men. And you can see here their educational level, employment level, monthly income in Turkish liras, monthly shopping budget, and frequency of monthly shopping, and their accommodation as demographic features. Also, now you can see the Cronbach's alpha and reliability of the model that we have used. It's 0.82 for personality scale and 0.80 for brand trust, which is a very reliable number as Cronbach's alpha. And secondly, as you can see from the table, that there is Pearson correlation analysis according to openness, consciousness, agreeableness, extroversion, neuroticism, and brand trust. The correlation between openness and brand trust, as you can see, is statistically significant because it has 0.002, which is less than 0.05. And again, the correlation between consciousness and brand trust is also statistically significant. There is a correlation, positive correlation among these variables. And again, there is a positive correlation between agreeableness and brand trust. As you can see, the number is 0.003. Unfortunately, there is no any correlation observed between extroversion and brand trust and neuroticism and brand trust. Therefore, our first three hypotheses has been accepted as research findings, and fourth and fifth hypothesis has been rejected. You can clearly reach these numbers according to from the table, and you can see the first three are significant, as you can see, but the extroversion, neuroticism, and brand trust correlation is unfortunately not significant. There is no any correlation among these variables. As a conclusion and research results, consumer behaviors have been examined by two scales as brand trust and personality in this research. And there is a significant relationship between brand trust and openness, which will guide to companies and regarding their marketing policies that's providing and establishing brand trust and openness will lead them to reach more customers in ready-to-wear sector. Also, there's a significant relationship between brand trust and consciousness, which can be summarized as companies should lead a way by answering the consciousness level of customers in ready-to-wear sector to provide their brand trust, because the important questions for customers in ready-to-wear sector, if they're answered clearly in their minds by company, and this will lead company to establish brand trust, which will lead them to make their shopping again and again from that company in case of that need in ready-to-wear sector. Also, there is a significant relationship between brand trust and agreeableness. So providing a brand trust is again very important for constituting agreeableness, that while customers they need to be confirmed in their minds, so not for conflicting but agreeableness. Therefore, constituting also this variable will also provide brand trust. Therefore, companies should focus on providing these situations for creating brand trust. And future researchers might focus on different sectors, as we have focused here on ready-to-wear sector customers, but there's also a big gap in other sectors. Therefore, future researchers should focus on different sectors to make a comparison among sectors. Thank you very much for listening our presentation.
მოგესალმებით საქართველოსდან, მივესალმები კონფერენციას, ყველა მონაწილეს, წარმატებას გისურვებთ.
Greetings from Georgia, greetings to conference participants. I wish you great success in this event. I would like to present problems of securities market development in Georgia. The topic is presented through the following subjects: relevance of the topic, establishment and evolution of the development of securities market, hindering factors and reforms that were carried out during the implementation of the securities market development, existing situation and existing challenges. Well-developed financial markets will help attract international capital investment and will contribute to effective distribution of local financial resources. Securities market is especially important in the way of transmitting to market economy. It is kind of alternative for the banking sector. In many European countries, securities market is more attractive and effective for getting funding. For the savers, it is considered as an alternative of bank deposits, as in many cases it gives more profit than bank deposits. So it is a new opportunity for the Georgian market to attract new capital and create new savings and new investments. It supports the business environment and stimulates the business activities in the country. So that's why the topic is very actual nowadays in Georgia. There are following securities available for trading in Georgia: corporate stocks, corporate bonds, securities issued by national bank, and state bonds. Nowadays, three institutions regulate the securities market: Division of Securities and Stock Exchange under the Ministry of Finance, Agency of State Enterprise, and the National Bank. The following legislative acts regulate the securities market in Georgia: Law of Georgia on securities market, Law of Georgia on circulation and stock exchanges, Law of Georgia on entrepreneurship, Law of Georgia on foreign investment, and the provision of investment funds. There are following factors that affect securities market: legislation, infrastructure of stock exchange, investment banks and brokerage companies, privatization process in the country, tax policy, investment attraction policy, protection of private ownership, macroeconomic sustainability, and awareness of the public on this issue, and their trust towards securities. So, based on the above mentioned, we would like to analyze this situation, the evolution of the securities market. The Law of Georgia on securities was adopted in 1995 by the Parliament, and by that time it was considered one of the best practices in the world in the post-Soviet countries. In order to well functioning of the securities market, it is necessary to consider following components. There should be a supply of securities on the stock exchange. There should be the companies that will issue securities, and of course there should be the free capital in the country which will present these securities. In 2007-2008 years, there was distortion of the legislation on securities that caused the destruction of the securities market. As we mentioned, the securities market was established in late 90s. And the active involvement of USAID and their specialists helped this process. In the first stage, there were around 40 brokerage companies, 12 independent registrants. So the institutional and legal framework gave the opportunity to develop securities market. So till 2008, so the transactions on the stock exchange was growing, but during that period, national policy has changed in a bigger way, and basically it was about legislative acts that were distorted largely in that. It was linked about listing procedures, registration of securities, and also allowance of transactions out of stock exchange in the outside market, and it destroyed the securities market and took its functions. And as you see the results of these actions on this slide. So after these banks gained the monopoly on the securities market. So from 2012. But the financial policy and also the policy on securities has changed. With the help of foreign allies and friends, we started research on securities. There were amendments in the legislative acts, and the development of infrastructural elements were initiated, and we see the results of these reforms. And so the activities on the stock exchange still start growing. So you see on the slide the dynamics of stock exchange. Of course, it is not the very optimistic figures, but we have a promising start, and we hope that in future there will be better results. And as you see, there is a similar situation in the bonds market. So gradually from out of the market, these transactions are coming back to the market again, to the stock market again. Of course, there are still some challenges that need to be addressed. At the first stage, the National Bank, it's not necessary to regulate legal and regulatory environment of the capital market. The Ministry of Finance sees the challenge of how a level of financial education is in the country, and also low liquidity is still the biggest challenge for the capital market. Also the pension fund, which will create a large institutional investor in itself. So, and then you see the some reforms that should be carried out in order to develop securities market, and it eventually will get better results and will strengthen the securities market. Reforms are planned in many directions. So now we will present some specific directions and specific reforms that will meet the requirements of the market. So, for example, the bonds, state bonds market. So the main problem in this market was the changes in the law of state debt. So the share of government bonds in Georgia's domestic product was planned to be 10%. Now it is 6%. To raise the accessibility of the market to individuals, it's this reform also is in the process. So the research on primary dealers is almost completed, and also the research on benchmark bonds, and also the issues related to bonds which are indexed by inflation. And now concerning the stock market, the following reforms are underway. Adding securities to the national bank's accounts, creation of a new platform for the stock exchange, the harmonization with euro directives is in the process. So helping state enterprises through privatization process. Also the reform on exemption of capital gains is in the final phase, and this process is carried out considering all the best international practices. It is also important the situation in the corporate bonds market. So we have the following challenges here. It was planned to create association of corporate bonds, and the process is underway. Also the process of accepting the corporate bonds by the national bank is in progress. It was also necessary to implement assessment indicator, and this is also in the progress. And adding the corporate bonds in the clear stream link, and this is in the progress. Also one very good motivator for development of the securities is the pension reform. So we'll, very soon the country will switch to private pension fund reform, and it will create new finances in the country, and these funds can be directed to the securities market. And also want to underline the importance of the legal framework. We have this following challenges in this area. The regulatory concept of this market is has already started. Becoming Georgia the member of IOSCO, so there is a legislative analysis in order to implement the best policies and best practices. International experience is highly considered in the listing process. As you might know, reinvestment profit is not taxed in Georgia; it's exempted from profit tax. So there are also other incentives that will attract individual and institutional investors. Despite this ongoing and already completed reforms, there are still some problems to address in order to effectively manage the securities trading. But what's very positive is that attitude from the government towards securities market is now has now changed in the better way, and we think that it is one of the stimulators and motivators of the future development of the market.
Future development of the securities market, along with the other advantages of Georgia, such as geographical location, such as favorable business climate, will create the opportunity to make Georgia a financial hub in the region. So basically it was all, and thank you very much for attention.